Okay, good morning. Thank you, Phil, for your generous introduction. Good morning, family, friends, colleagues, esteemed visitors. Many years ago, after graduating from UWA, I had no idea what to do next. A research job came up at Curtin University, which was right next door to where I was living in Eastwick Park. Proximity seemed as good a reason as any to apply. The research was about work design and multi-skilling. I remember asking people, what on earth is work design? Eventually I went to the library, that's how long ago this was, and I looked it up so that when I came to the job interview, I was able to persuade the chief investigator of the project that I knew what I was talking about, and I got the job. That chief investigator was John Cordery, who is now the Provost and Senior Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Curtin, and who is here today. Don't know where is he? Hiding over there. So through the happy coincidence of living close to Curtin and John's willingness to put aside my ignorance, my career in this field began. Such that now, many, many years later, I am thrilled to set up the Centre for Transformative Work Design. Okay, so this morning my goal is to introduce you to this area of research. Because some of you are probably sitting there wondering what on earth is work design. We will start with that. Then I'll discuss some of its untapped potential. And if I've persuaded you that work design is important by this point, you will want to know what to do about it. Last, we'll look at how work is changing and the future critical role of work design. Whilst I'm talking, Matt will sketch some of the ideas from my presentation, so please do come up and see the sketch at the end. So, what on earth is work design? Well, we're going to see if you actually know. So we're going to test out the technology here. Those of you who've got smartphones, if you go to the polev.com by the Bay site there, you will see some questions, and I'd like you to answer. If you've got an old-fashioned phone, you can text by the Bay on the number shown there and text your answer. So I'm going to show the questions next, hopefully. This works. Worked this morning. Pat, it's not working. Oh, it's working, thank you. By the way, that's just one person's response, so don't get fooled. So please, a job with good work design has lots of money, status and perks, aesthetically pleasing and architecturally innovative workspaces, the autonomy to make decisions, tasks that are meaningful, support from your colleagues, challenging tasks, yet a reasonable workload, all of the above, or answers C, D, E and F above. I'll give you about 1 more minute. Oh, so up the top there, Tracy, where it says polev.com/by the Bay. You're not awake yet this morning. So 15 people got their act together. We'll get a few more before we move on. We have a clear winner emerging there, down the bottom. Everybody managing to cope with the technology? Says up the top there, polev.com/by the Bay. That's how you do it. So, whilst the slow people are putting in their results, what we can see from the fast people's results up there so far is that the most popular answer is answer C, D, E and F above. And this is in fact correct if you're planning to put the wrong one in. We will move on. You'll get another chance for a poll shortly, so you slow people can get ready in advance. So good work design isn't really about money and perks. We all want that in our work. But what really makes work meaningful and healthy is when you have the high job resources indicated there. So these are psychological ingredients almost of work that make it healthy, meaningful and motivating. For example, a key job resource is autonomy. It's a fundamental need of humans to want to exert some control over the environment. So at work, being able to make decisions about when and how you do your tasks is vitally important. Other job resources include tasks that are meaningful, social support, getting feedback on how you're performing, the chance to learn and develop, and so on. At the same time, we all have demands placed on us in work. We're expected to solve problems, for instance, which is good because that keeps us intellectually stimulated and engaged. So good work design has a reasonable but not overwhelming level of demands. So we can put job resources and job demands together to create a simple model with demands along the top and resources down the side. The best sort of job, which about 1/3 of workers have, is an active job. The job is active because there are challenging tasks that stretch us, but at the same time, there is the autonomy and the control and the support to manage those challenges. Now, if you have a job that has a lot of job resources, but very few demands, this is what I call the cushy job. This is a nice, pleasant job, but it's not very stimulating. In recent times, we've seen the emergence of the hyperactive job. This job has plenty of job resources, lots of control, lots of support, so it's engaging on the one hand, but on the other hand, there are simply too many demands, even given the high resources, which can cause stress. I'll come back to this hyperactive job a little bit later. And then there's the straight out bad work designs, which I will elaborate on in some more depth. About 1/3 of workers have passive jobs that lack resources and that also lack intellectual challenge. These jobs are repetitive, routine, low in autonomy, often highly insecure, and sometimes physically quite grueling. These are soul-destroying jobs. Listen to this worker. My job was to sit on a stool and make sure that the plastic tubing wound round the bobbin. I worked 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. When I started, I used to take the newspaper in to work to read in break times. But after a month, I was struggling to read it. When I said to my boss that I was going insane because of the repetitive nature of the job, I was told that I might be promoted to the person who got off his stool every hour to fill up the hopper at the end of the line. I quit. Unfortunately, many people in these jobs cannot quit for financial reasons, so they are locked into this form of daily drudgery. One consequence of these passive jobs is wasted talent. The book shown here, Nickel and Dimed, is about a journalist who decided to work in low-skill jobs like cleaning and hospitality for a year. One of the things that she learned, which really surprised her, was that even though in every single job she tried her hardest, absolutely no one spotted that she was highly educated. She had a PhD from Carnegie Mellon and highly capable of doing much more in the job. How much human talent are we wasting when 35% of our workers are in this category? Let's talk now about stressful jobs. These too lack resources, but to make it worse, they also have high demands, such as lots of work, complex emotional pressures. These jobs are like trying to cross a busy highway with no control over when you cross and no support when you get run over. In Australia, workers' compensation claims for mental stress cost $200 million per year. The highest frequency of work stress claims come from the human services sector: police, prison officers, paramedics, social workers, some of the key jobs in our society. You're thinking, well, this makes sense. These workers are exposed to traumatic incidents, violence and so on. And yet, only 7% of those workers' compensation claims relate to those sorts of events. By far, the most claims actually come from poor work design. Too much work, chronic time pressure, deadlines, constant restructuring, no support. So listen to this account from one paramedic. The things you see are just awful. We went round someone's house and a man was hanging. Straight after that, we had another job. There was no outlet. You don't stop. You go from one call to the next. There is no respite. There's no support. Your colleagues are in the same boat. You don't want to seem weak or be the person to let the team down. By the time you finish, 12-hour shifts end up being 14 or 15 hours. It's too much. Tragically, in the last 10 years, more than 110 police, paramedics and firefighters have committed suicide. Let's compare this to the number of shark attacks in the same period. Shark attacks reach the news. Work-related suicides do not. Now, we're going to do another little poll. This time, I would like you to indicate which category of the ones that I've just discussed your job fits into. Is your job a passive job? Is your job a high-stress job? A cushy job? Let's see, there's got to be one person in this room with a cushy job, surely. An active job or a hyperactive job? Okay, I'll give you a chance to do your poll. Okay, please try not to be tempted to check your emails while you're doing the poll. Alison? Okay, so we will stop there. We've improved. See, 45 people have done the poll this time, in that amount of time. So you are learning. This is good. Now, so what you can see from that figure is that most of the people in this room have an active job, which is absolutely what I would have expected. What I also predicted, though, was that many of you would have hyperactive jobs. So I thought I would talk about hyperactive jobs next. So for those of you in that category, you can pay special attention. So these jobs are good on the one hand. They've got autonomy and support and meaningful tasks, and people feel engaged and creative and committed. But the very high level of demands can also take its toll in terms of physical and mental health. One of the biggest risks, interestingly, in this job is excess sitting. So I don't know if you've heard the phrase, sitting is the new smoking. This slide shows different risks of death as a function of the level of physical exercise and sitting. At all levels of exercise, sitting more than 6 hours per day, that's the green bar in the picture, increases the risk of death, and quite dramatically if you're already not doing much exercise. Another issue with this hyperactive job is homework challenges. This is often a particular issue for women who still do the majority of domestic work and childcare in most homes. Many women don't choose hyperactive jobs, or they leave them, as in this news story about a woman who was the first female in a very high-level US foreign policy job, but who ultimately resigned because of the exceptionally long working hours that made it impossible to meet family commitments. Again, wasted talent. So you've seen from the poll that most of us here in this room actually have reasonably well-designed jobs. We're lucky. The majority of workers, more than 2/3, do not. We see labour exploitation on our farms, stress in schools, in universities, and indeed worldwide. Now this actually has a big price tag. PwC estimates that work stress costs $10.9 billion per year. If in the centre we manage to reduce Australian work stress costs by 1% for the 5 years of the centre, we will have saved $545 million, and we will have paid for the centre 90 times over. So, the first message for this morning is that for the price of good work design, you get healthy workers, a safer workplace, fewer injuries, lower absence, reduced workers' compensation claims, and that's not all. You get motivated and loyal staff, you get creative, innovative companies, you get agile teams and organisations, customer loyalty, attraction and retention of talent, in some, and return on investment, in some, a better world. And there might even be more benefits of work design. I want to turn now to the second component of the presentation, the possible untapped potential of work design. First, the bad news. Intelligence declines with age, especially what is called fluid intelligence, and that's our memory, our problem-solving ability, our speed of processing. So you can see from this figure, the red line there, that fluid intelligence peaks at about the age of 20 and thereafter deteriorates quite rapidly. So most of us are already on that downhill run. But now for the good news. And the good news is that recent research shows that the brain is actually more malleable, more plastic than was originally thought. There are things that we can do to slow down the intellectual decay. So, I am a psychologist, so I'm bound to talk about rats. In the 1960s, researchers found that rats reared in enriched environments, so cages with toys and ladders and tunnels, actually had more developed brains relative to those in normal cages. And later research in humans showed similar findings. For example, being raised in low-quality orphanages causes delayed cognitive development in children. The use it or lose it mechanism explains these findings. If we don't use our brain, we are likely to lose it. And work appears to be important. In countries where people retire earlier, such as France, there is actually a greater decline in fluid intelligence as people age. And some evidence suggests that it's not any work that matters, but good work. So in a Swedish study of twins, in which one twin had Alzheimer's and the other twin did not have Alzheimer's, they found that the twin who had Alzheimer's had worked only in very simple jobs with not very much intellectual challenge. Seemingly, they were not using their brains sufficiently and hence were losing cognitive function. This is just one study and it's early days in this field, but I believe that work that is well designed with lots of challenge and job resources is like a rat cage with lots of toys. We will test this hypothesis that good work design promotes brain development in a 20-year longitudinal study as part of the centre, the Working Across the Lifespan study. We will track over time how passive jobs or hyperactive jobs or stressful jobs affect cognitive functioning as well as other forms of growth and development and of course physical and mental health. Zookeepers understand the value of enriched environments for the health and development of their animals. Hopefully this research will help managers to understand the value of enriched work for the health and development of their workers. So the second key message for this morning, good work design enriched with job resources might help to keep us smart. If work design is so important, what can we do about it? So, I want to give an example of a work redesign. Oops, lost my slides, hang on a sec. Okay, so usually when we look at, I'm going to give the example of midwifery because that's a context that I've been working in recently. This is the way that midwifery jobs are usually organised. So normally you will have a whole group of midwives who provide prenatal support to a pregnant woman before the baby, and then there's a different group of midwives that are scheduled to provide support during the birth, help with the baby's birth, and then there might be a different set of midwives postnatally. So what that means as a pregnant woman, and those of you who've had babies know this, is that you might see midwife A, B and C before the baby, and then you'll see midwife D, E, F and G during the birth of your baby, and then finally you'll see midwife H after the baby. Is there another way to design this work? Well, in New South Wales, in one of the hospitals there, they in fact chose a different way to design the work. In this case, a group of pregnant women were allocated to one midwife who worked with them over the whole year to help them prenatally, during the birth, and postnatally. So, as a pregnant woman, you would see midwife A before the baby, midwife A when the baby is born, and midwife A postnatally. So hopefully you could see that this might have some benefits for the pregnant woman, because they actually would have a midwife helping them to have a baby whose name they know. Hopefully you can see that this might have some benefits also potentially for the midwives in terms of feeling that they have a meaningful and impactful job. What were the outcomes of this study? For patients and the hospital, they did a randomised control study, so 748 women were randomly assigned to each of these two models, and what they found was that on most outcomes, very similar consequences of the two models, except that the caseload model, that's the second more innovative approach, had fewer elective caesareans, more spontaneous births, less postpartum blood loss, faster discharges from hospital, more babies breastfed, and it cost $556 less per woman under this model. So good for the clients, the end users. Okay? What about the midwives? And that's the component of the study that we've been involved in. Well, we found that the midwives under the caseload model had significantly better work design. They had more job resources, more variety in their work. They had a stronger sense that they were doing something significant and worthwhile, and they also had more autonomy in their work because they were able to liaise directly with the pregnant women to work out when they needed support. They had ultimately less intention to quit and higher job satisfaction. So, work can be redesigned. This is just one example. There are many examples in research of how you can change the work design to achieve better outcomes across all different sorts of occupations. So that's the good news, but in practice, actually, work redesign is often quite neglected as a strategy. Work design is like the part of the iceberg that's under the sea. Poor work design results in symptoms, and these symptoms like low performance or lack of innovation and stress, they're quite visible. So the temptation is to make changes just to alleviate those symptoms rather than deal with the root cause, which is the poor work design. So for example, if innovation is low, let's put a slide in the office to make it more fun. Or, as Amazon is currently doing, let's have a greenhouse where employees can hang out and get inspired. Or, if stress is high, let's have our workers do yoga. Or let's send them off for some counselling. Or, if performance is bad, let's monitor them a bit more. And let's send them off for some training. Now, I'm not saying that these strategies cannot be helpful, but if work design is the root cause of the symptoms, as it often is, then these strategies will miss the mark. So my third key message for this morning is that work can be redesigned, but we often get stuck above the iceberg, curing the symptoms and fixing the people. Instead, we should improve the way that work is done to create better outcomes and better jobs for people. Okay, final component. How is work changing, and what is the role of work design? There is a lot written on this topic. We have 10 minutes, so we will focus. Work is changing in terms of what we do, how we do it, in terms of where we work, when we work, and it is changing in terms of who is working. Today, we will just focus on the role of technology and how this is changing work. And I want to focus on that because the rate of change in technology is exponential. And to illustrate what that means, I'd like you to pick up a piece of paper just in front of you. Yep, you can have a little look at it. That's the next seminar. Okay, and I want you to fold the piece of paper in half, and then half again, and then again. So it's now about as thick as a credit card. You've folded it 3 times. If you could fold it 11 times, which is actually impossible to do, but if you could, it would be about as high as a Coke can. So here's my final poll for this morning. If you were able to fold this piece of paper 42 times, how high would it be? Okay, there are some mathematicians in the room, so I hope that they will get this correct. How high would it be? As high as a desk? As high as the average Australian ceiling? As big as Big Ben? Or as high as the moon? We've got somebody who's born for the high... Ooh, we got a range of responses. Interesting. Okay. Oh, it's interesting. So, I'm going to tell you the answer now. The correct answer is D, as high as the moon. If you could fold a piece of paper 42 times, it would be as high as the moon. If you could fold a piece of paper 100 times, you would create a wad of paper over 8 billion light years in thickness. If you don't believe me, you can Google it. But not now, okay? Computer processing power is developing at this exponential rate. In the early 1960s, Moore predicted that we would double the amount of transistors we put on a chip every 2 years. Skeptics sort of queried this and thought it would last a couple of years. But in what has become known as Moore's law, this is still going strong. Indeed, some people suggest that we are doubling processing power every 2 years. That's the exponential rate of technological change. We're entering the second machine age. The first machine age was the invention of the steam engine, which meant that we could generate mechanical power beyond the power of humans and animals. Now technology is allowing us to boost mental power. One expert predicts that by 2020, an average desktop machine will have the same processing power as a human brain. By 2050, it will exceed the processing power of all humans on Earth. We used to believe that computers were great at following rules, but would be lousy at sensory perception. We now have autonomous cars. For the sake of my brothers who are in the audience and who are farmers, here is an autonomous harvester, which harvests crops by itself, all night, all day, to an accuracy of 10 centimetres. For those who are not farmers, here's Drew, Domino's robotic unit, that delivers pizzas. We used to believe that computers would not be able to deal with complex communication. But look at this report. Over the past 3 months, the consensus estimate has sagged from $1.25 for the fiscal year, blah, blah, blah. This report was written entirely by computers. Forbes is producing hundreds of these reports with no human involvement. We used to think that computers would be no good at emotional skills. But look at Paro the seal. This animated seal with real responses is being used in the UK as therapy for people with dementia. And just as an aside, my 10-year-old daughter has been watching videos of Paro the seal and is desperate to acquire one. But they cost about $5,000, so she's not going to be getting one anytime soon. Now look, there are big debates about this technological change and exactly how it will affect society. But what is absolutely clear, here there is no debate, work is going to change radically. Let's take a look at an example scenario that you're all familiar with, going to the doctor. This is the traditional model. You get a pain, you book an appointment, you see the doctor, you get the treatment. Well, in the future, you won't wait to experience pain. First, because of developments in genomics, you will know your DNA and your genetic vulnerabilities. Second, you'll be wearing devices to monitor your health, which will proactively warn you of problems. You're already familiar with Fitbits. In the future, your contact lenses will assess your blood sugar. You will swallow pills powered by stomach acids to monitor internal functioning. You will have wireless chips under your skin that will send you alerts when you forget your drugs. And then, using big data techniques, all of the hundreds of thousands of pieces of data about you will be analysed and interpreted. And instead of booking an appointment with a doctor, you might just tap your data into one of the ever-growing health websites. WebMD, for example, has 190 million visits every month. Or you might access one of the online communities where patients share experiences and treatments. If you go into the practice, you're unlikely to actually see a doctor. You will see a nurse who has diagnostic tools underpinned by huge databases. A new medical paper is published every 41 seconds. If a doctor was to read only 2% of this research, it would take a human 21 hours every day to read the material. The nurse will have that knowledge synthesised at his or her fingertips. Or you might opt for telehealth, or even telesurgery. As far back as 2001, in Operation Lindbergh, a team of surgeons in the US, with the help of advanced robotics, removed the gallbladder of a woman in France. And that was 15 years ago. And when it comes to treatment, robots will dispense your medication. The University of California has a robot that has given out 2 million prescriptions without error. You might get nanobots to swim through your body, attacking specific cells. If your doctor doesn't know what to do, they will crowdsource the problem. And if you need a new body part, like a new ear, experts predict it's not too far away that it'll be possible to print them using 3D printing. You can see that all this is going to mean quite radical changes in the work of a doctor, and most professional jobs will be undergoing similar types of change. And one of the things that will happen is there will be a disaggregation of the job. Some tasks will be routinized and carried out by computers. Some will be done online. Many will be done by paraprofessionals like nurses with the help of technology. Some will be done by teams. And some, a much smaller subset, will be carried out by doctors, and they will be different sorts of tasks to the tasks that doctors currently perform. One crucial set of work design decisions that will emerge is how do we decide who does which tasks? And most importantly, what should the computers and the machines do versus what should the humans do? How do we design work so that computers and machines actually support and empower us as human workers rather than enslave us? Answers to these questions should not be taken for granted. already we don't often make the best decisions in this respect. So I want to just give the example of aviation. On a typical flight, if I was to ask you to guess how long the pilot actually holds the controls for, you would be surprised to discover on the average flight it's about 3 minutes. The rest is automated. Pilots have become computer operators, and this is not always a good thing. In a study by the US Department of Transport in 2010, they identified that pilot error caused 2/3 of all crashes, and that a major factor in this pilot error was excess automation. Think about it. Flying involves quite a lot of psychomotor and also cognitive skills. If you don't use those skills, they get rusty. Expertise decays. So then, when some unexpected problem emerges and the pilot has to seize control of the plane, they've sort of forgotten what to do. And they make mistakes as a consequence. So now the Department of Transport has released guidance encouraging pilots to fly manually as well as allowing the computer throughout the flight to preserve the knowledge and the memory of these flights. That's just one example. There are many other domains where excessive reliance on automation erodes expertise. Think about your use of the GPS and the effect it can have of the mental model of the cities that you drive in. A study reported in Science showed that the availability of online information actually is weakening our memories. So next time you're at a dinner party and you can't recall who sang what song, try to actually remember instead of whipping out your iPhone. More seriously, in analysis of the finance industry, B-Day demonstrated how algorithm-based or computer-based expert financial systems cause judgment deficits and ultimately contributed to the Wall Street crash in 2008. Nicholas Carr refers to this as the glass cage effect of automation. Ironically, as our computers get cleverer, they might make us dumber. So my final key message is that in the future, we must actively design meaningful smart jobs in which technology empowers us rather than enslaves us. We should not just assume that the decisions that will be made are good for humans. Psychologists and related professionals need to get stuck in and help engineers and system designers to create work and technology that actually makes our lives better. I said before, we don't know exactly how technology is going to change our working life, but the best way to predict the future is to create it. Do we want those who do some of society's most important jobs to be so burnt out that they are driven to suicide? Do we want work that is so micromanaged, so mind-numbingly tedious that it accelerates the onset of dementia? Do we want some of our most talented people to have to forego their work passions because the working hours are too long? We already have significant challenges in achieving good work, but there are more profound challenges ahead as we navigate the second machine age. Our vision for the Centre for Transformative Work Design, along with the Accelerated Learning Lab and the Centre for Safety, is to proactively address these challenges, to help achieve for all work that is healthy, that is productive, and that might, over the lifespan, even make us smarter. I hope that some of you will get involved with the Centre and help us to achieve that vision. I would like to conclude with the words of a famous psychologist, Sigmund Freud, who asserted that love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness. I'm inclined to agree with Freud. So, if you will allow me to be personal for just 1 second, for making my work meaningful, I would like to thank my students, my colleagues, my collaborators. On the love side of the equation, I would like to thank my friends and family who are here today. And finally, for both love and work, I thank my wonderful life partner, Professor Mark Griffin. Thank you for coming. Okay, so questions? Yes?
So you mentioned about computers, how they can be trained by artificial intelligence, they can be trained for emotional intelligence. They cannot really interpret.
No.
There's a difference in what they can interpret and what they can be trained to do.
Absolutely. Thank goodness. Yes. Did you have? Yeah, no, I agree. That's absolutely right. There are still, and there will always will be, things that humans can do that computers can't do. And that's why it's really important that we think about, when we're designing work, who should do what. And I guess I'm also arguing that actually allocating those tasks to human will help preserve human dignity and meaning and cognitive intelligence. So yeah, it's a great comment. Another question, comment? You're not allowed out of the room unless there's at least 3. So we might as well get it over with. Paul?
In the history of work, job specialisation has been a fairly dominant part of position. And when you compare job specialisation with job enrichment through work design kind of processes that you're talking about, you're looking at a better workplace for people in terms of the latter model, lower absenteeism, lower turnover, and a better life, if you like. But what about the other argument, which has always been very strong, if you like, in economics and in traditional work design, and the impact on productivity and so on? So what's the evidence say about that productivity side?
Great, I'm so glad you asked me that question. There's an enormous amount of evidence that, just like that work redesign example that I showed you, if you redesign work well, it's possible to achieve better outcomes for the organisation and better outcomes for the individual. What you need to do is you need to involve the workers in that process themselves and be clear about the goals that you're trying to achieve. So there's many, many examples of work redesign enhancing performance and productivity. And this is particularly true in more dynamic and uncertain and unpredictable environments. There, it is really crucial to give people autonomy and control. If you try to have everything specialised and prescribed, you can't adapt and respond flexibly. So actually, the more complex and uncertain the environment, the evidence shows the better it is to have these high-quality work designs. So, and there's a lot of evidence out there. I know that sort of is counter to the sort of engineering types of ideas around specialisation and so on. I mean, one of the problems with that type of thinking is that it might work for a short amount of time, but if somebody's doing the same thing over and over again, actually that's not necessarily sustainable in the longer term. So, yeah, thanks, Paul. So, Robin.
I wonder if you've reflected on the work that you do, and have you thought about how universities might redesign their work?
Oh, wow.
Let's pretend that you do teaching. So let's just think about teaching. How might we redesign university teaching?
Wow, that's a big question. How might we redesign university teaching? I think the very first thing you do is actually involve people who do university teaching in the discussion. So that would be the first thing, and that often isn't done. So I guess it's about trying to match people's interests and expertise with the task at hand, and giving them some autonomy and flexibility about how they do that. So if we go down the path with teaching of trying to prescribe and micromanage, your lecture should be this long and your notes should look like this and everything, then actually you're taking away what's probably best about academics, which is their ability to be creative and innovative and so on. So I guess allowing academics autonomy in thinking about how to do that would be a good starting point. Yeah. Tough question though, Robin. Yes?
Mr. Parker, firstly, thank you for really and the challenges we face in the resource industry. Some of the very first things you talked about are
to our success. Your very first point you made was around autonomy and decision making in the role. In your research around business, where do you look when you see people that have done that very well?
Okay, so there are lots of good examples of giving people more autonomy. And one of the responses we sometimes get from people in mining and stuff is, oh, you couldn't possibly do that here because we have to make things safe, so we can't possibly allow people any latitude. There are many, I can't think of any in Australia, but there are many examples I'd be happy to share with you. And certainly, for example, there's a famous one written up in Harvard Business Review that some of the students have probably read about a tomato manufacturing plant where the workers actually have enough autonomy to set their own salaries. And you probably think, oh, well, that would never work. But it actually does work because there's sort of systems around to help make it work. And by the way, when we talk about giving people autonomy, I'm not advocating sort of anarchy. It's very important in many contexts to have some disciplines and some controls. But it's about a balance. So, and it's about working out what things should be controlled and disciplined and what things should there be some autonomy and latitude over. So, and again, I'm happy to share some examples and books later on. Thank you. Yes?
I agree with everything you've said today, but what I would say is that your concepts have been in the minds of many going back 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's so wonderful that you've crystallised what a lot of people have been saying. And retirement, it seems to me that the whole concept of retirement should be abolished in favour. But you see, a famous lawyer in New York, George Seward, who was president of the IBA, he was interviewed in his New York law office, looking extremely dapper, with a handkerchief in the pocket, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it was on the occasion of his 100th birthday. And the interviewers got round to saying, Mr. Seward, have you thought about retirement? And he said, why should I stop having fun? And I notice it particularly with judiciary, because I'm a lawyer by occupation. So many judges, from being very busy, go to doing not very much, and they develop all sorts of Alzheimer's type mental problems. So this is why I think that one should abolish the whole concept of retirement in favour of going on until you can't do anymore, or when you want to retire, not compulsory retirement at 55 or 65. But it does seem to me that what you said is very important, and with law firms and accounting firms, for instance, there's now tremendous pressure on fee budgets, time budgets, and so a top lawyer in a Perth firm today would be earning about $2 million in a top international law firm, but they don't last there for very long, and furthermore, half their $2 million goes in tax. Which is fair enough. So the problem really is that they don't end up with all that much because they don't work for that much time.
So keep them working longer.
So it does seem to me that one should get right away from these ruthless fee budgets, and because it contributes directly to tension.
Thank you.
As you were saying. So I think that what you said is very important, but we should look at abolishing the concept of retirement at 55 or retirement at 65.
Thank you. I actually watched a movie, great comment. I watched a movie coming back from Hong Kong on Saturday night called The Intern. So I recommend you watch that. It's about an old guy that goes back to be an intern. But just on that point, one of the other changes I didn't have time to talk about is the ageing population. We've got really big challenges ahead because of population ageing. And one of the most important things to solve that challenge is actually to keep people in work longer. Because otherwise we're going to have a very small number of people working, trying to support all the health costs of all these older people. So we need to keep people working. So it comes back to good work design, we need to design work that's meaningful and motivating and healthy for those older workers so that they want to stay in work. And we need to do that economically for our country. One more question? Alison.
Sharon, just when you were saying that, it made me think about part-time work. And so again, for years and years and years, we've been talking about the importance of meaningful part-time work, particularly in senior roles for women and for their careers. And from a policy perspective, as much as the research can show all the reasons why we should be doing this, from a policy side and a practice side, it just doesn't seem to really be happening. And perhaps you can't answer it as a question, maybe it's more of a comment, but yeah, I don't know. Can you see a way through this? The same sort of issues, I guess.
It's the same sort of issues, and it's this broader point about giving people more control over when they work. If we were a bit more flexible about that, then maybe we don't have to have part-time and full-time. There can be all sorts of different arrangements that could work. And one of the challenges there is then people often perceive that part-time workers are not as committed and that they're not as serious, and so then they miss out on development opportunities, and it creates a sort of vicious cycle. So part of it is also about changing the attitudes of the people around the part-time workers to help them understand. So that's not a policy implication, but sometimes you can have a policy, let's have part-time work, but to get it to actually work in practice, we need to change the organisations and the leaders within them. So yeah, great question. I think that's it for me. Thank you.